Everyone, welcome back to another lesson in MTH1W. Today we're looking at operations with integers. So what is an integer? An integer is a number with no fractions or decimals. It is part of the sequence -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, and 2. And some other examples of integers would be like 27, 856, -9,213, and so on and so forth. When we're looking at multiplying and dividing integers, when we are multiplying, again here, if we're multiplying a positive by a positive, it's going to equal a positive. If we're multiplying a negative by a negative, it's also going to give us a positive. So here, if we see that it is the same, we are going to get a positive answer. If it is different, so here if we're multiplying a positive by a negative or a negative by a positive, we are going to get a negative answer. And so when we look at dividing, it's the same concept. So if we're dividing a positive by a positive, we're going to get a positive answer. And if we get a negative divided by a negative, we're still going to end up with a positive answer. So again, same means that we're going to get a positive answer. If it's different, so we take a negative and divide it by a positive, we're going to get a negative answer. If we get a positive divided by a negative, we're still going to get a negative answer. So if it's different, then it's going to be negative. So the rule really is same, positive, different, negative. And so there's a few ways that we also can represent multiplying and dividing. So again, some examples here. So if we're taking 5 times 3, you can see here, you can positive 5. The dot represents multiplication, plus 3. We might also see something as positive 5 times using the x times 3. That one is usually less common because, again, if we're working algebraically, then sometimes we might get that mistaken as a variable. And the last way to represent multiplication is using brackets. So here we have positive 5 times positive 3, again using brackets. So these would be ways to represent multiplication. When we're looking at dividing, there's a couple ways to represent division. So we can write it as a fraction. So here, let's say -5 divided by -3. And another way to write it is using the division symbol. So -5 divided by -3. And so these are ways to represent division. Okay, so let's look at a couple of examples here. So the first example, we have -4 times -7. And here it's a negative times a negative, which means that we'll get a positive answer. And here 4 times 7 will give us 28. Here for B, we have -3 times 8. So a negative times a positive, which means that we're going to get a negative answer because it is different. And 3 times 8 will give us 24. The next question involves two multiplication statements. So first, if we look at 3 times -2, 3 times -2 will give us -6. And we still have it multiplied by 5. Here we have -6 times +5, which will give us a negative answer, and 6 times 5 will give us 30. And so anytime we have these expressions where there's multiple multiplication statements, and we just do them one at a time. And so here we have -2 times 5. That will give us -10. And we can write the rest. So times -3, times -1, and times 2. Then we do the next multiplication statement. We have -10 times -3 here, which will give us +30. times -1 times 2. 30 times -1 will give us -30, and we can multiply that by 2. And then the final answer, we can remove all the brackets. -30 times 2 will give us an answer of -60. So the next two examples here, we're looking at division. So again, we have -14 divided by 2. Again, remember, same rules apply. If it's the same, then it's positive. If it's different, it's negative. Here we see that it's different. So which means we'll get a negative answer. 14 divided by 2 will give us 7. So our answer is -7. Here we have -25 divided by -5. Again, here, this is the same, which means that we'll get a positive answer. 25 divided by 5 will be equal to 5. When we're looking at adding integers, again, if we are adding positive numbers, the answer will always be a bigger positive number. And if we're adding negative numbers, the answer will be a bigger number. So here what we want to do is we always want to simplify if two signs are touching. And so here we have -2 plus -3. So if we look at this on a number line, so here we'll have -5, -4, -3, -2, -1, and 0. So here we're starting at -2. And so here -2 plus -3. So plus times negative will give us negative. So it's really -2 minus 3. And here, if we are subtracting by 3, moving 3 to the left. So here, 1, 2, 3. And so our final answer will be equal to -5. Here we have +5 plus +1. Positive times positive will give us positive. So here it is equal to 5 plus 1, which is equal to 6. Next, we have -2 plus +4, which is just equal to -2 plus 4. Here again, if we look at our number line, we'll go -2, 0, and +2. So here if we start at -2 and we go plus by 4, we go 4 to the right. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And so here our answer will be +2. And lastly here we have 2 plus -3. Positive times a negative will give us a negative answer. So here we have 2 minus 3. And so here if we draw our number line, start at -1, 0, 1, and 2. So if we start here at +2, and we're going back by 3, so 1, 2, 3, then we'll get an answer here of -1. Here when we're subtracting integers, we have -2 minus -3. Here, negative times a negative will give us a positive. So here, that would be -2 plus 3, which will give us an answer of +1. Here we have +5 minus +1. Negative times a positive will give us a negative, which is equal to 5 minus 1, which is equal to 4. Here we have -2 minus +4. So again, here, this will just be -2 minus 4, which is equal to -6. And then here, 2 minus -3. So negative times a negative is a positive. So 2 plus 3 will be equal to +5.